change. I love the diversity. You really have 128 different plant species, 48 different orchids, 25,000 total plants.
Today, visitors from the American Institute of Architects of San Francisco are soaking up information about how the steel structures were turned into colorful plantscapes.
We're not taught this in architecture school. We're taught about metal and glass and wood, not so much living plants and how to incorporate it. So I think you need the right partner. I just call everything an orchid or a fern, but there's more to that. So the botany, I think, would be an important part, and I think it'd be a great sector for architecture to intermingle those two fields.
Brenner believes the living wall trend is catching on throughout the country as congested cities search for new ways to transform concrete jungles into natural experiences. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
Well, for more on living walls and green urban spaces, as well as its impact on communities and cities, I'm joined by Eric Westerduin, live from Charlotte, North Carolina. He's the president of Sweet Plants and an expert on living walls. Welcome, Eric.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So start by helping us understand the logic and purpose behind these living walls.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd say the first thing is just the beautiful aesthetics. I'm sure your viewers were able to see in the video that some of these living walls can be like a beautiful painting or mural, but just done with live plants. But the interesting thing is, beyond the aesthetics, there's so many benefits to having the plants in our environment. For one, they clean the air that we breathe. They also do a lot to help mitigate sound and absorb a lot of ambient noise. But I'd say the main thing is that they bring people closer to nature. For so much of our lives, we're surrounded by man-made elements and environments. Think about it. You wake up in your house, you get in your car, you go to the office. You're constantly surrounded by metals and plastics and other things made by man. And bringing these living walls into our built environment is an opportunity to bring humans back closer to nature. And there's a lot of interesting and exciting research being done on a concept of biophilia, where humans benefit actually from being brought closer to nature. And it's been shown that it can boost our productivity, make us happier, and actually for workers, decrease the amount of time we take on sick days or absenteeism. So I think there's a lot of interesting benefits to living walls.
And with all those benefits, we're certainly seeing other countries and companies also getting on board when it comes to living walls and living architecture. Some are using building roofs, some are even using buses. But to what degree are all these projects making an impact on climate change? Yeah,
so that's a great question. And I'd say if you look at any of these projects in isolation, it's going to be a very small drop in the bucket, and obviously climate change is a very large, complex problem that there's not one silver bullet solution to. But when you look at collectively all these roofs, walls, buses together, my hope is that they make some sort of impact on a collective measure. And I think that there's some interesting research being done to show that plants really do help reduce urban heat island effect. They can mitigate stormwater runoff, and so there's some really good benefits of green walls and green roofs that help us fight climate change. And like I said, on a singular level, maybe it doesn't look so much, but when you add them all up, all across the world, if we keep building them, right, I think it'll have hopefully a good impact, and if nothing else, at least it'll make our cities look beautiful.
Now, let's also talk cost. I mean, how affordable is it to incorporate and maintain these living installations, especially into existing structures?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I'd say that's changing every year as more and more architects and designers look to incorporate living walls into their buildings. The more volume we do, and the technological advances that are made, the cost is coming down. I'd say if you looked at it 10 years ago, it was hundreds of dollars per square foot, whereas now it's coming down to around 150, even 100, sometimes under $100 a square foot to get all of this stuff installed with plants and the system. And I think that's we're seeing a transition now with what used to be living walls and living roofs only in buildings. We're actually seeing some of that in residential spaces now. It's becoming affordable enough for the average homeowner to put into their own home.
So then what sort of support has there been from government and the private sector at large on this?
Yeah, so from governments, there's been a lot of incentive and subsidy programs all around the world for green roofs particularly. But in the private sector, I think we're seeing a lot of companies react to their customers and their employees demanding them to be more sustainable or more green. So I'd say, putting a giant green wall in your company's lobby is a great way to signal to your employees and your customers that you're committed to being green and being sustainable. And I think a lot more companies are taking the plunge and investing in this sort of green infrastructure.
So then, as we're seeing some countries, but clearly not all, really taking on this challenge of incorporating green architecture, what other innovations in living architecture should we be paying attention to?
I'd say there's a lot of really interesting things on the horizon. One that I think is an interesting twist on vertical gardens and green roofs is that now we're starting to incorporate some actual production farming. So you see in urban areas particularly, they're starting to do vertical urban gardening where they're actually growing fruits and vegetables and lettuces in these vertical gardens. And if you look at how much they're able to produce vertically in a small amount of space, it's multiples times more than what you'd be able to produce outside in an acre of crops. So the technology is still really in the infancy and it's a little expensive now, but I think give it some time to progress and I think that's a really interesting sector to watch.
All right, thank you so much for your insights. Eric Westerduin there, President of Sweet Plants. Well, for more content like that, please visit our website, america.cgtn.com, and click on the Global Business tab. You can find By Design in the drop-down menu. All right, still ahead on the show, find out how a popular Chinese app is blowing up in Nigeria. Unlikely or not, you decide.
Justice in your mind.